Chapter 1. Latham, 1512. Each time I left my home in the fertile plains of Lancashire, I never knew how long I would be away. The last adventure up by Ford Castle had been mercifully brief, and it meant that I had not left my wife and children alone for long. I felt guilty when I did leave them. I had men I had hired who could fight and defend as well as farm, but the raid from the brigands and pirates from Norway had been a warning. The nearest castles to us were Chester and Lancaster. There was not even a stronghold on the Ribble where my wife's family lived. We visited the hall at Clitheroe once or twice, but it was a long journey, and when my youngest children were born, too difficult. I visited the home of the Lord of Lancashire, Lord Stanley, more often. Latham was a mansion, but there were no walls, and the garrison there was a small one. The days when lords of the manor had kept household knights, men-at-arms and archers were long gone. The wars between York and Lancaster had been viciously self-destructive, and so many men had died in that conflict that there were fewer men left to defend England. Castles had been pulled down on the orders of Henry Tudor, and moats were filled. I was aware, especially after the raid on Burskoff, that there was still danger, and I did my part and made a point of riding my horse around Ecclestone, including the outlying farms that were a couple of miles away, to let the people there know that someone would look in on them. I spoke to everyone. There were old people, men who had fought alongside my father, and they lived alone. Not every child stayed in the village. Some took themselves to places where the employment was not agricultural. Some wanted to live in the towns that were expanding. It meant men and women were left to fend for themselves in their old age, and I did not think that was right. With the greatest crop being sheep, we needed fewer men to work the farms. England was beginning to change. When I rode my lands, I took James, my eldest son, with me. Walter sometimes came too, and when he did, I walked. I could confidently have James on my horse behind me, and he could even ride a horse himself, but Walter was a lively boy. He was always safer when he was tethered to me by my hand. On those walks and rides, I came to know my sons. Both were clever boys, and Jane had taught them their letters, numbers, and prayers well. They would not be the wild child that their father had been. Even so, James was desperate to be a billman. He was a year or so shy of beginning his training when Ralph arrived. He was growing very quickly. When Ralph came, his expectations changed, for he liked the idea of becoming a man-at-arms rather than a billman, like his father. Even though there was no war, there might be opportunity to be a knight. I had no such ambitions. Sir Edward had been used by the king once he was elevated to the peerage. Despite my skills and my service, I was mercifully overlooked by the king. I had been his spy, but once my service was over, then I was forgotten. It had been Sir Edward who had taken me to war the last time. I was happy to be an anonymous farmer, living in the back of beyond. "Can I be trained by Ralph, father?" I laughed. He had insulted me, but James did not know that. "You know that Ralph came to me so that he would be a better man-at-arms. He is learning from me." "But he is a man-at-arms," I sighed. "If you wish those skills, then I can teach you. But you need to be proficient with a billhook first." "Is not that the weapon of a common man?" I shook my head, for it was seen as a somewhat static and inglorious form of warfare by many. Men-at-arms who were plated from head to foot and fought with expensive weapons were seen as more heroic. Once you learn to wield a billhook, then a poleaxe, spear, and other pole weapons are easier to use. A pole weapon keeps an enemy from being too close to you, and fighting with your brothers in arms presents a solid wall that few can breach. When you use a sword, you are, perforce, working alone. The slightest mistake can cost you your life. Sir Edward discovered that up on the Tweed. He was the best man-at-arms I knew, and became a good knight, yet because he did not keep up his training, he died. You are still young. Spar with a pole, and when you are big enough, I will let you use a billhook. You may watch me work with Ralph, if that is your wish, and learn that way." He was happy with the bone I threw him. Ralph and I worked for an hour after breakfast, and an hour before evening. The rest of the time he worked with my labourers, for he was building up his muscles and wished to earn his keep. There was no contract between us, and he could leave whenever he wished. He still had the horse given to him by Sir Edward, and he had taken money from the men we had slain. He had sword skills, but I had been taught by mercenaries who lived and died by their skills. I knew more tricks than he did, and I had fought in more battles and skirmishes than he had. We used 2 old-fashioned swords.